This is the Linux terminal. You can download packages, browse the web, and even nuke your entire system in one command. However, if you are new to Linux, then you don't know how to harness this power, because if the terms like shell, bash, and script have got you thinking, "What?" then this video is for you. But don't worry, because I'll take you from a level 1 noob to an absolute Linux powerhouse with just this video. Trust me, all the ladies are going to love you, because I'll explain everything about the Linux terminal for absolute beginners so that even you and your dog can understand it. Now, before we perform a suplex into the big ocean that is the Linux terminal, let's just take a little dip into the local pond in order to take things slowly. So you'll first need to understand some basic pillars. Pillar 1, the terminal. Now you might be thinking, what actually is the terminal? Well, you won't need to get your passports out because it doesn't have anything to do with airports and planes. Instead, the terminal is simply a text-based application that allows you to directly interact with your system. Now, the terminal may seem pretty intimidating, and it is, because there are no icons and buttons, but it is the most powerful thing on your system, once you know how to use it, of course. Now, there are many popular terminals out there, like Alacrity, Kitty, and my favorite, Ghosty. They all have their own features, but as a level 1 noob, you don't need to worry about which one to use just yet. So think of the terminal like a painter, and definitely don't think of that one. Anyway, the terminal simply accepts your keyboard and mouse input and draws the result of something called commands on the screen. And you must remember, the terminal application itself is dumb. It doesn't know anything about files, commands, or your favorite photos collection. However, people typically refer to the Linux terminal as if it's one big thing, but I'll explain this in more detail. Okay, so how do I interact with the terminal? And if the terminal is dumb, then what is doing all the work? Well, let's tackle the first question. You use the terminal via text and special characters called commands, like these here. And these commands do something, hence the name, and so they perform a certain action or sequence of actions. And this thing here is called your prompt. No, not a prompt to exit this video, but instead a prompt that simply provides you with some basic information like your user, the system name, and in what folder you currently are located. Now, you might be used to creating a folder like this. Just right click and select the corresponding option. But what if I told you a secret? You've essentially just used a terminal command without knowing it. What you didn't see is that this following command achieves that same result. That weird make part just stands for make directory and is the actual command. So we are telling the system to make a folder. The folder name over here is something called an argument. And unlike the term, there's no shouting involved, but instead means the command needs another keyword to function. And in this case, it is the folder name. And unlike a dissatisfied wife, a command can sometimes take multiple arguments. So why stop at just one? Just look at all these folders. Now, you might still be a bit confused. So this is what you are typically used to. Number 1, we have an action that we want completed. In this case, it was to create a folder. We use the graphical interface to select the option from a list of menus. So think of the GUI like a friendly and interactive middleman. Number 3, the action returns a result, which is the newly created folder in this case. So with the terminal, we have this instead. Number 1, an action or command to run, which again is to make a folder, and number 2, the result or the output, i.e. the folder is created. Hold on, just wait a moment, but where is the middle step? And that's a good question. See, this is where the shell comes in. Now, unfortunately, we aren't going to be by the beach, as it isn't that kind of shell. However, a shell simply acts as an interpreter. The shell takes in a command, understands it, and delivers the output. So the shell is the actual program running inside your terminal, reading all of your commands. Now, you may have heard of bash, ZSH, and fish. Those are some popular shells which have different features and nuances, but what you need to know is that they all work fundamentally the same under the surface. However, the bash shell will typically be installed on your system out of the box on most distros. So let's summarize this segment. Number 1, we have an action that we need need to complete, so we use the terminal. Number 2, we have a shell which takes our commands along with any other additional arguments and understands them. Number 3, the shell delivers the result. Now, why am I saying delivers and not processes? This is because the shell gives the commands over to the operating system to perform, and there is a lot more to it with things like system calls and things like that, but I simplified it so it's easily digestible for you. Pillar 2, commands. So now you understand the basics of the terminal, let's make things a little practical. So get out your terminals everyone and get ready to type some commands. These are going to be the most basic ones that you'll use a lot. ls. This shows or lists all the files and folders within your directory or folder. You can also supply an argument, which is the location of a directory. Now that just means that you can see the contents of a folder without having to actually switch into it. Now with commands you also have an extra feature called options. So think of options like further instructions to give the command, which consequently changes how the command will behave. So take a look here. This is me running ls with no options. However, now look at the result with options. See, by using options I have access to much more information like the file size, something called permissions, and the dates of creation. So if we take a look at the manual for ls, we can see that each option that I used did a different thing. The -l here creates an easy to read list format. The -a shows all of the files, even hidden ones that start with a dot, and the -h uses size formats that are easy to read. Now I must emphasize that each command will have its own options. While there may be some overlap, each command will have different letters and options which perform different functions. Next up is cd, which allows you to change the directory or the folder you're in. Simply provide the argument, which is the location of where you want to go. pwd or print working directory is also extremely useful. Now you don't need a printer for this, but instead you can check where you are on your PC by using this command. So if you are cding all over the place, this command is helpful in knowing where and how lost you actually are. The next command is touch. Now you might be thinking, touch? No thanks, but don't worry, as this simply allows you to create a file like this. Touch Zeroes&Ones is really cool.txt. Now you can also cp this file, which just means copy. So I can copy this file to another place like so. Now if I make my way towards that directory, I can see it copied here. Now let's say you didn't like where you copied the file, you can then remove it with rm, just like so. Okay, but maybe you don't want to remove the file, but just move it somewhere else. Well, move or mv has you covered. Simply provide the file you want to move as the first argument, and then the location of where you want the file to move to as the second argument. And would you like to know something cool? You can also rename files and folders with move. For example, I provide the file or folder and then the name I want to change it to, and voila, just like magic. Now if you are an animal lover, you're going to love this next one. This is because you can simply cat a file. Now unfortunately that doesn't turn any file into a cat, but instead allows you to see the contents of a file. You can also join two files together and have them displayed in a singular output. Now for these next two, imagine doom scrolling for boomers, but the scrolling actually ends and it's not as fun. See, more and less work like the cat command, however they allow you to scroll through the output, meaning when you exit it, your terminal stays nice and clean, unlike Berlin. Although use less because it has many more features like being able to open larger files more efficiently and having a more advanced search. Now if you like flipping coins, then head and tail is for you. Now if you have a fat file with 1,000,000 lines, then you don't want to print the entire file as it will just clutter up your terminal. Instead, you can take a peek at the first 5 lines with head and the last 5 lines with tail. And if you're a greedy pig and 5 lines isn't enough for you, you can use an option which allows you to specify the number of lines you want. So here I am providing the option with -n, so it prints out 8 lines instead of 5, and you can also just provide the number 2. Now all these commands and options might be a lot to take in, so you may need some help. Luckily Linux has a fantastic resource built right into the OS, and you can do so with the man command. The feminists are definitely not going to like this one. Anyway, if there is a command that you're struggling to remember, you can look up the options here. You can just use J and K to scroll up and down and press Q to exit when when you're done. Now, if you want to be extra fruity, install TLDR using your package manager. This is a more user-friendly version of man as it provides you with helpful examples. Now, there are a million more commands with each command having many options, but I have a lot more to explain in this video, so take this as a very gentle introduction to the world of Linux commands. Pillar 3, paths. So in Linux, there are two types of paths that you need to know: relative paths and absolute paths. Yet you might be thinking, wait, what the hell is a path? Well, a path is just where something is or where it's located on your computer. So let's take down absolute paths first. See, this type of path always shows you where you are from the root or start of your system and shows you every step of the way. So imagine it this way: you're baking a cake and you have a lovely little recipe from your grandma. The absolute path would be reading every single instruction from the start of the page, whereas the relative path is you continuing from the step you are currently on. So let's take this folder here. The absolute path is this: it shows every single folder it is encapsulated in, whereas the relative path is this. This just shows the file's location relative to my location. Now, you might also see this squiggly little line here. Now, this isn't a little worm on your system, but actually is incredibly important to understand. Whenever you think of this squiggly line, I want you to think of home. And no, not the one you are currently in, but instead your home on the Linux file system. So think of this like a shortcut for your home directory. Your home directory is where most of your folders that you use on a daily basis lives, like your documents, downloads, pictures, and so on. So let's say you want to copy this file to your pictures directory while you are in the downloads directory. As you can see here, I cannot access the pictures location because of my relative path. So we use this little worm here to point to the pictures directory. For example, we can write cp file.jpg and then the pictures directory with the little squiggly line and a /. So this will copy this file to the pictures directory. So the shell or interpreter will take this squiggly line and essentially see home, 0, or obviously your user, and pictures like this. Pillar 4, pipes and redirection. Now, if you thought that was a bit hard, then don't worry, because it's about to get harder. The first thing we will talk about is pipes. Now, I'm not about to give you a lesson in plumbing, however, this is incredibly useful when working inside the terminal. So let me just show you. Let's say I wanted to only print the last 5 lines of a file. Do you remember what the command was? Well, it's tail. So let's do that. Now, what if we wanted to get the number of characters in these 5 lines? Now, obviously I could just count them, but we are Linux users. So first let me introduce you to WC. And no, not that one. So WC just allows you to, you guessed it, get the word count within a specific file. Now, it also allows you to get the total number of characters using this option. So this is where our best friend pipe comes in. See, pipe allows us to take the result of one command and feed it into the command of another. So essentially we send it down a pipe. So the entire command will look a little something like this. We get the first 5 lines of this file, and then this input is sent to the WC command, which calculates the number of characters and prints it to the screen. And now we have our result. As you can see, we didn't get any output for the tail command. So you can also think of the pipe character as a filter, getting only what we need. Now, you can also do this with a number of commands as long as the command can take input in this way. So let me show you a bigger command. Now, I know this might look really scary, but it actually isn't. I just want to show you how useful pipes are, so you don't need to know the commands here. Instead, I just want you to focus on the difference after each command and why pipes are incredibly useful. As you can see, they allow us to perform multiple operations on data as one singular command. This is incredibly helpful when programming in Bash, for example. And now you see why pipes are so good. So we've talked about pipes, and now let's talk about redirection, and more specifically this symbol over here. Now this symbol also works similarly to pipes, as we can send our output somewhere else. However, unlike pipes, we don't send the output to another command, but instead to another device or file. So let's take this command here. This prints out the contents of the artist file, sorts it alphabetically, and then removes any duplicates. Now this greater than symbol did something magical. Instead of printing out the output to the screen, it took the output of these commands and redirected it into a file called artistsorted.txt. And here is the content of that newly created file. Cool, right? Now that's cool, but do you want to see something even cooler? Well, instead of one symbol, how about two? So let's go back to our command and add this symbol instead, like so. As you can see here, the output was appended to the file. So instead of replacing it, it just added to the end of the file. Now that was redirecting to files, but I also mentioned redirecting to devices. But what devices and how? Well, these devices already exist on your system and live at /dev on the Linux file system, but one that you'll use regularly is dev null. So if you're into computers, you may have heard the term null before. So imagine you can't even see, smell, hear, touch, or feel, or even think, but you still exist. In the same way, null means nothing, just an absence of anything. And it's important to remember that it doesn't mean zero. Null is nothing. So anyway, we can redirect any output to dev null and we won't see it. Okay, but what does this have to do with redirection and how is that useful? Well, take this command here. Again, you just need to understand the basics. So this command is looking for a very special video file, but it's searching my entire PC as shown by the root symbol over here. So as you can see, we are getting a lot of errors because it doesn't have access to certain areas of the system, which is pretty ugly, right? So all we need to do is add this little tweak. Now this might look like hieroglyphics, but let me explain it. See, this 2 over here means an error, just like the ones here. So by adding this little bit, any errors that we were getting previously are being redirected to dev null, which as you now know is like the vacuum of space. We don't see the errors and as a result have a nice clean terminal all through the power of redirection with this symbol here. Pillar 5. Command successes and failures. Now you need to know that every command has something called a status code or an exit code. This simply tells the OS whether a command failed or was successful, and it does this by using these numbers over here, 0 or 1 or above, or should I say zeros and ones. Anyway, if I run this bogus command, it tells me that it doesn't exist because it doesn't exist. So if I type this, it will tell me 127. Pretty weird, right? But because it's above 0, we know it's an error. However, what type of error? So as you can see here on this website, 127 means command not found. And if the exit code is 0, which means success, just print it out to the screen. Now take a little breather as that was a lot to take in. And the thing is, that is only a small part of the Linux terminal. The terminal can do so much more, but this video was just a gentle introduction into you becoming an absolute Linux genius. So I hope after this video that you understand the Linux terminal just a little better.